This video is a pilot for a potential series of 6 videos related to simple, brief, and precise. Together, they would constitute the full-day seminar presented periodically by me, Darrell Walters. The subject of this sample video is brevity, which would make it the second in the series of 6. Hello, my name is Darrell Walters. Welcome to the second of a 6-part series based on the book Simple, Brief, and Precise: How to Make Your Writing Easily Understood. For each of these 6 sessions, I'll show writing samples to you on screen, describe flaws, and show revisions. And you'll respond by penciling those revisions onto the corresponding writing sample sheets. These are the 6 sessions that constitute the series. Today's topic is brevity. So, you should have in front of you now the writing sample sheets that accompany Session 1, Brevity. These sheets amount to lecture notes that are 90% written for you. All you need to do is revise as we go along, and at the end, you'll have a complete set of notes. And penciling in the revisions will help you absorb the writing principles more firmly. You'll also want to have with you a copy of the 2020 edition of Simple, Brief, and Precise. And it will be helpful for you to have explored the book a bit first, or at least have looked over the writing principles inside the back cover. William Strunk Jr., about 100 years ago, wrote one of my favorite sentences of all time: omit needless words. That's exactly what you'll need to do to keep your writing lean. You'll also need to be wary of the number of words contained within individual sentences. Take care of these 2 aspects of writing, and you'll soon see a dramatic rise in the effectiveness of your writing. You'll like the result, and I can guarantee that your readers will appreciate it. We'll begin with the problem of needless words, which come in 2 types: filler and redundancy. Let's start with filler. You may remember a time back in about 8th grade when your teacher said, "You have a 5-page paper due Friday." You panicked. 5 pages? How am I going to come up with enough words to fill 5 pages? And you bailed yourself out with a new writing style. If became in the event that. To became for the purpose of. And you got the job done. Here's my 5 pages, teacher. Right? Well, that habit doesn't just disappear. It becomes deeply rooted over time. And until you become conscious of it, we're going to make you conscious of it in some detail right here. Until you become conscious of it, you won't root it out. Let's take a look now at a grammatically perfect sentence. In order to prepare ourselves to supervise employees effectively, we should read the key literature that is published on the topic. We should attend the workshops that are offered by our company, and we should make it a point to talk to the experienced supervisors who are available to us. The first 2 words are filler, because in order to means the same as to. The subject-verb combination we should is needed, but not 3 times. So we can get rid of these 2 and keep just this one. The most common single word filler may be the word the, and we have 3 of them. They can all be eliminated. The most common 2-word filler phrases are who are, which is, that is, etc. We have 2 of them, and they can be eliminated. This phrase is not needed because whether a document is published is irrelevant, and if it were not on the topic, we wouldn't read it. This filler phrase is common and unnecessary. And finally, since the chances of our talking to persons not available to us is non-existent, there's no need to specify that we will talk to those who are available. So, this is what we have left. To prepare ourselves to supervise employees effectively, we should read key literature, attend workshops offered by our company, and talk to experienced supervisors. Joseph Joubert, a French essayist, said about 200 years ago, "Words, like eyeglasses, obscure everything they do not make clear." Every word you put into a piece will have one of two effects. Either it will serve your purpose, or it will get in the way. There's no middle ground. Look at the difference in word count between the two versions of the message we just revised. A 2-page memo written in the first style could have been written on a single page with room to spare if the filler weren't there. A 10-page paper could have said everything in 4.5 pages. A 200-page master's thesis could have been completed beautifully in about 90 pages. That's a sobering thought, isn't it? Which document do you want to read? Do you want to read 10 pages or 4.5 pages? Do you want to read 200 pages or 90 pages? The version you want to read is the version you should give to your readers. Let's look at a few shorter examples that contain filler. They chose the winner by lottery. While pushing for a merger, we lost perspective. He calculated the statistics only to confirm what he knew. If none of us arrives on time, Preston will deliver our reports. We will meet inside if it rains. We are reviewing financial statements weekly. On a weekly basis has several cousins. On a daily basis, on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, on a regular basis. Apparently there's an allure of some kind to the word basis. Daily, weekly, monthly, annually, and regularly work just fine. Another kind of filler, something that I call a slow start phrase, increases the number of words in a sentence by taking a roundabout route rather than a direct path. When you begin a sentence or an independent clause with "it is" or "there are," or any number of variations, who is, who are, which is, you'll find yourself on your way to writing a long, indirect sentence. Instead, launch the sentence with the subject and the verb. Think how much easier it is for readers to take in a sentence about marketers needing, rather than about it ising and there areing. Notice the number of slow start phrases in this next example, which I took word for word from an announcement posted in a train station. I've changed the names to make it generic. I'll give you half a minute to read it. We have this is, and there are, and there will be, and this is, and there are. Had the Transportation Authority asked me to revise this notice, this is what I'd have given to them. The revision contains all the important information hidden in the original word salad. In addition to eliminating the this is and the there are's, I left out the parts about having parking bumpers and 50 spaces. Why? Because if you use the parking lot, you'll see them, and if you don't, it won't matter. All the commuters needed to know was that the lot is on this particular corner and it's available at no cost. François de la Rochefoucauld, a 17th century French writer, said, "True eloquence consists of saying all that should be, not all that could be said. That's an excellent maxim for writers to live by. Let me give you a chance to read the original again. And the revision. Let's take a look now at some other common pieces of filler that clog up our writing. First, a few words and phrases that often can be omitted altogether. Just watch them appear in the list, and as you do, take an inventory of your likelihood of using them excessively. And now, a list of phrases that too often replace a brief word or two. Again, watch the list develop and see what applies to your writing. Cruising through these lists can be unsettling, can it? You may want to look over those lists more leisurely. If so, you'll find them and others on page 32 of the textbook. Another impediment to streamlined writing is a string of prepositional phrases. In the event of an error on the page, in the back of the book, on the... To a reader, that kind of sentence feels like driving on this road. Lois DeBakey, a professor at Baylor University, says, in language, as in mathematics, the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. She's referring only to nonfiction writing, of course, not to the use of words to create imagery or beautiful sounds. But then you're not trying to be a poet. As a business person or a student, you're trying to communicate thoughts and information as efficiently as possible. For your purpose, straight line writing is best. Here's another example of a sentence that fails to move in a straight line. The successful implementation of a rewards-based motivation system for unmotivated employees depends on knowledge of the extent of their feelings of detachment, the nature of their desired involvement, and the type of reward system most likely to be perceived as valuable. 8 prepositions. That style of writing weighs a sentence down like a body draped in wet clothing. Here's a revision. Read it and feel the difference. One preposition. This revision could just as well be an example of using active verbs. Look, in the original, the verb is depends and the noun is implementation. Would you rather read about implementation depending or managers creating and needing to know and employees who feel, want, and value? Notice all the active verbs. Improving writing in one particular way, in this case, shortening it, quite often improves it in other ways. In this case, activating it. Now I'm going to give you 1.5 minutes to look over a short example and see what filler you can find. On your notes, cross out words you'd like to see gone, and if you think other words are needed to make the piece whole after you've removed the filler, pencil them in. I'll be back with you in 1.5 minutes to show you the solutions I would apply to this piece. Let's read through it now, and I'll make revisions as we go. Sometimes there are multiple ways to solve a problem, so your revisions may be different from mine. Very seldom is a revision purely right or wrong. The investigator's job was to identify the people responsible and to do so while safeguarding the company's image. He met with the CEO daily to monitor the fallout. The kind of work he was doing and the people he met were unusual compared with any work he had done previously. The first week of the investigator's work passed, and he made plans for the second week on the case. This sentence is entirely superfluous. You may find yourself talking to yourself on paper like this when you're struggling to get a new paragraph underway. It's not uncommon. You just need to recognize it so you don't end up with a full sentence of filler. Now, having removed that babbling first sentence, we'll need to adjust the second a bit. At the beginning of his second week on the case, the investigator introduced himself to two key players to win their trust. We started with 109 words and removed 35 for a new total of 74. That's a reduction of about 1/3 of the original. Now we're ready to leave filler and move on to the other cause of too many words: redundancy. Redundancy. Just for the record, redundancy isn't necessarily bad, depending on what it is that you have two of. In writing, though, there's nothing cute about redundancy. In a large piece of writing, redundant material may amount to paragraphs, too much for us to tackle here. If you notice a paragraph or two in your writing that says essentially what you've said elsewhere, you must have the fortitude to choose the better of the two and throw the other one out, regardless of how much of it there is, how hard you work to write it, or how attached you are to it. That can be painful sometimes, but you owe it to your readers. Working with a smaller unit, see if you can discover a redundant sentence in this paragraph. You may have noticed that that last sentence is redundant to the first. It has to go. Quite often, redundancy is a matter of repeated words or phrases sprinkled throughout a piece, rather than whole paragraphs or sentences. Let's find the redundancies in this announcement that arrived in my mailbox a while ago. Within a span of about 36 words, shareholders appears twice, fund 3 times, and this date twice. Let's revise it to remove redundancies. At a special meeting on January 21, 2019, shareholders approved changing the fund's investment objective, period. Then we need to get rid of this so reading the date in the next sentence doesn't become an irritant. Accordingly, as of April 15, 2019, the following information supersedes any contrary information contained in the prospectus. What we have left is this. Admonitions about redundancy are not meant to say that you should never repeat information in a document. You may need intentional repetition to make a point or to recap key points. Intentional repetition is a legitimate tool. Aimless redundancy, though, is a blunder that burdens readers with extra words and obscures what you're trying to say. Let's take another look through the original and the revision of that last example. Notice the streamlined feeling that the revision gives. What we generally think of as redundant writing are the kinds of duplicated words, phrases, and sentences we've been talking about. But there's another kind of redundancy. Sometimes we write words redundant to what the reader already knows. For example, let's think about the word accordingly. Its function is simply to tell the reader that the second sentence is an outcome of the first. You might decide that's obvious and therefore redundant to something that any reasonable reader knows intuitively. In that case, it's just taking up space that it hasn't earned, and you need to get rid of it. Now, let's look at a few other examples of sentences having words that are redundant to what the reader is sure to know. For openers, everyone knows that history happened in the past. That's why it's called history. Considering the safety record, anyone with a booking on that airline may want to change plans. No one changes plans for a flight already taken, so the word future is redundant. He could potentially be charged with embezzlement. Could implies potential, so this word is redundant. My best guess is that in this situation, potentially is used primarily for its sound. Speaking of using a word for its sound, this word means closeness. So close proximity means close closeness. One who wants to preserve the erudition could simply do this. One who can do without the erudition might do this. And finally, this. By using the internet, they can compare and contrast databases across the various departments. Be careful not to use the words different and separate where the difference or separation are evident. Different is redundant to something everyone knows. Without the word different, no one will take it to mean that the databases being compared and contrasted are the same database. Now I'm going to give you a minute and a half to look over a short example and see what redundancy you can find. On your notes, cross out words you'd like to see gone and pencil in words that you think are needed to make the piece whole after you've removed the redundancy. I'll be back with you in a minute and a half to show you the solutions I'd apply to this piece. Let's read through it now, and I'll make revisions as we go. Sometimes there are multiple ways to solve a problem, so your revision may be different. Having now tried 4 employees in that position in less than a year, I feel obligated to offer my opinion. Opinions are by nature personal. We have the job configured in a way that no one can manage. It is redundant to job. If we expect success there, the only place that expectations can be fulfilled is in the future. We need to make changes. I think we should redistribute the work among the 3 persons working in that department. Though the redundancy is between both and as well as, my preference is to use and, except where it's important to emphasize that the second is equal in weight to the first. And redesign the workstation for this unique does not come in degrees, position that has given us so much trouble. Period. The only place that the trouble could have occurred is in the past. We will need a week to 10 days to accomplish that. Why not approximately? Because a week to 10 days is already an approximation. And the plan should include having those 3 persons share the workspace. It has to be the same space if they are sharing it. Now we're ready to move on from the issue of purely unnecessary words to the issue of number of words per sentence. We've all read what feels like the never-ending sentence, a sentence that probably requires rereading to take in all that's there. Periods and question marks, and sometimes exclamation marks, give readers permission for a fraction of a second to process what they've read before moving on. There are a few ways to tame an overly long sentence. The obvious solution is to break it into shorter sentences. Another option is to blunt the effect of a sentence's length with wise use of punctuation. But we'll save that solution for the punctuation session. And sometimes we get so much detail crammed into a sentence or paragraph that the most efficient way to deliver the information is to draw a picture. We'll start by breaking a sentence down. I hate to do this to you, but we can't analyze the effect of a monstrous sentence without reading a monster. There shall be added to the charges under this agreement, and the client shall pay to Rawle Incorporated an amount equal to any taxes, levies, and duties, however designated or levied, domestic or foreign, based upon such charges, this agreement, the services or materials provided, or their use, including without limitation state and local sales and use taxes that are paid by or are payable by Rawle Incorporated, plus interest and penalties, if any, exclusive, however, of United States federal, state, or local taxes based on the net income of Rawle Incorporated. And now listen to the feel of a multi-sentence version. The client shall pay to Rawle Incorporated additional charges equal to taxes, levies, and duties generated by this agreement. All such charges, domestic and foreign, will apply. That includes charges associated with services and materials that support the agreement, state and local use taxes payable by Rawle Incorporated, and any interest or penalties attached to such taxes. Excluded are federal, state, or local taxes based on the net income of Rawle Incorporated. Rudolf Flesch, who wrote many books about writing in the mid-20th century, devised a readability scale that included a theory about sentence length. His 2 conclusions were that average sentence length should be fewer than 20 words, ideally 14 to 18 words, and that sentence length within a piece of writing should vary greatly. Let's analyze the monstrosity that we just read. The original overstuffed sentence contained 92 words. The unstuffed version contains 4 sentences as shown here. The reduction of the total number of words from 92 to 72 is less important than this, the average number of words per sentence. That 18-word average is right in Rudolf Flesch's wheelhouse. And look at the word count for individual sentences. This variability from an 8-word sentence to a 30-word sentence makes the piece much more readable. You may have driven across a desert or a plain where you see very few variations in scenery or terrain, where sameness and monotony set in. Think how much more attentive you are when you drive through the mountains, up and down hills, and around curves. The same holds true for reading sentences. You'll be more attentive if the sentences vary in construction and length, rather than having a dull sameness about them. Be conscious of varying sentence length as you write. And write an occasional 2 or 3 word sentence by design just to keep the reader fresh. Here's the best gift that the revision gives to readers, this 8-word sentence. All such charges, domestic and foreign, will apply, period. Think of short sentences as gifts to readers, and the shorter the better. The researcher's attempts to recruit an experimental class yielded 24 students who accepted his invitation. Now listen to the wordiness and stodginess of this last phrase. While 7 students were disinclined to participate. Whereas if we were to do this, we would have a terrific gift for readers. 7 declined. A 2-word sentence. Writing very short sentences is not as easy as it seems. For practice, I once decided to impose a short sentence exercise on myself. I created ridiculous parameters for a short story, fewer than 100 words total, with each sentence containing exactly 2 words. It won't take long for you to read it. I'll give you 40 seconds. That's not anything suitable for publication, but the writing of it was instructive. Here it is. Another exercise you might try is to trim a finished sentence or paragraph by a specific amount, 10% or 20%, or maybe enough to keep it from wrapping on to the next page. Even though the name of the game is simply to shorten, you might find that you improve the writing in ways that you otherwise wouldn't have. I seldom shorten a piece of writing without improving it. Sometimes you'll find a paragraph difficult to read because it's overstuffed with details. That's when it's time to call on a technique beyond plain sentences and paragraphs. Maybe even draw a picture of some kind. The simplest way to clarify details is to use numbers. For example, this paragraph has several distinct messages within it. By placing numbers in the seams, you alert readers to when it's time to change train of thought. If you have a lot of small details, you'll want to use a table. A sentence like this, for example, would be abusive to readers. You don't have to read more than about half of this to know it doesn't work. Give it a try. You'll want to put this kind of detail into a table. You'll introduce the table in the narrative. And you'll give it a number for easy reference and a title for readers who just look at the pictures. Generally, we think of tables as tools for presenting an array of numbers, but you can use tables also as a way to present words that would otherwise clog up a paragraph. Look at this paragraph. It can be read, but it will not be assimilated as efficiently as if the information were organized in a table. A table may take more page space than a corresponding paragraph, but if we define brevity in terms of how much readers need to read to understand what's written, the table is more brief than the paragraph. Now I'm going to give you a minute and a half to look over a short example and see what you might do about adjusting sentence length. On your notes, cross out words you'd like to see gone and pencil in words that you need. This is not a matter of right and wrong. Many solutions are possible, so the chance of your solution matching mine is probably 0. I'll be back with you in a minute and a half to show you the solutions I'd apply to this piece. Let's read through it now, and I'll make revisions as we go. Keep in mind that the great number of possibilities guarantees that your revision will be different from mine. Personnel issues have become complex. Period. So we'll start with a 5-word sentence that's easily absorbed and sets the stage. Decades ago, the boss gave orders and employees expected to follow them. Period. More recently, well-meaning protections installed to guard against employer abuses based on gender, race, and age have created loopholes. Period. Too many workers seem willing to exploit those loopholes in unprincipled ways. Now that the abusive hand has been passed from employer to a worker, we may well be heading toward an exodus of good leaders from management roles. Period. That could lead to a crisis in the quality of leadership. Two sentences of 51 and 34 words, respectively, have become 6 sentences, whose length varies from 5 words to 26 words. Coincidentally, the total number of words is identical. The important difference is in the average sentence length, which was 43 in the original and becomes 14 in the revision. So let's look now at the writing principles from simple, brief, and precise that we've covered here. Then we'll wrap up this session with a few final thoughts. First, Principle 11, avoid filler. To a writer, the principle of avoiding needless words should become so strong a belief as to almost become a religion. When you cut material from your writing, you should feel downright joyful. When you remove a few words, smile. When you remove whole sentences, rejoice. When you remove paragraphs, throw a party. Sidney Smith, an 18th century clergyman, said, "That writer does most who gives readers the most information and takes from them the least time." Principle 12, avoid redundancy. What can I say about this? Principle 13, monitor sentence length. When you see a monstrous sentence creeping into your writing, don't leave it there for the reader to untangle. It's your job to tame the beast before you pass it on. And Principle 14, vary sentence length. When you go fishing, you want everything to be as long as possible. When you write, you want to catch fish that look more like this. I was playing golf some time ago when an analogy came to me that may resonate with you most if you're a golfer. Steady improvement through committed practices leads to using fewer strokes and fewer words. Whether golfing or writing, to just flail away and call the result good enough is easier than developing skill. Cicero is said to have added this postscript to a letter he wrote to a friend. Had I had more time, I'd have written you more briefly. In case you are still unconvinced of what can be accomplished with the skill of brevity, take a look at the word count for these documents. This, in a nutshell, is the story of where our language has gone over time. Many writers have fought wordiness over the years. Mark Twain said a book is made good more by what's left out than by what's put in. George Orwell accused unthinking writers of tacking words and phrases together like parts of a prefabricated henhouse. Rudolf Flesch spent his entire career fighting wordy writing. And today, many others are carrying the banner. You, too, can become a carrier of that banner. And you and your readers can enjoy all the advantages that brevity confers. Simply commit yourself to this principle. Think of fewer words as a beacon that lights your way through every sentence and paragraph you write. Thank you for joining me in this exploration of brevity. I hope you'll participate in all the video sessions based on simple, brief, and precise.